I'm Charlie Sykes. Welcome to the Contrary podcast. We're recording this on feels like still the morning after the No Kings rally. I'm joined by Jim Acosta. We have a lot to talk about. I want to talk about Donald Trump's apparent tantrum in the Oval Office with Volodymyr Zelensky. He's got a war of words with the president of Colombia, itching to go to war with Venezuela. We have all of that. And I want to talk about the fact that the president of the United States posted an AI video of himself shitting on the protesters. And I'm sorry, I apologize for the language, but this is not the moment for euphemism. So, Jim, let's talk about the No Kings rallies. Probably one of the largest events, protests in American history. Seems to have been overwhelmingly peaceful, extraordinarily well attended. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of demonstrating that you don't necessarily need a march on Washington like we saw in the 1960s. You have a march on Main Street taking place in cities, in towns all over the country. And the one in D.C. was huge. Make no mistake, I was in that crowd. We were doing some live coverage with Don Lemon and Joy Reid. And, it was what did Donald Trump say about January 6th? It was a love fest. Down by the National Mall. And, I thought it was really inspiring, Charlie. I really did. To see Americans pick themselves up off the floor, dust themselves off, especially a lot of progressives, but also disaffected conservatives, independents, and so on, children, elderly, people of all races, you name it, working class folks. It was a really diverse mix of people. And these are folks who are just fighting mad and saying, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And I thought it was I thought it was just fantastic. And I suppose that is part of the reason why Trump had the reaction that he had. And he is determined to be the president for only half or less than half of the country. And he demonstrated that over the weekend.
No, I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I was really struck by not only how huge and peaceful the protests were, but yet people were mad as hell. But there was a sort of a street carnival vibe to the whole thing. Yeah. I was up in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, massive turnout, lots of American flags, clever signs. No one behaved inappropriately at all. And people were really in good spirits. And I think that, to a certain extent, that seems to have annoyed MAGA more than anything else, that you kind of had this celebration of Americanism. Nobody was fazed at all by this war of words. This is going to be a hate America rally, Antifa and Hamas. People took that as the joke that it was. And so it was successful. Of course, now the big challenge is what now? What happens next? These things are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Okay, this was a good morale builder, but the real question is what happens next? Where does that energy go? Because we wake up the morning after, Donald Trump is still in charge. He's still in control. The political dynamics have not changed. So where do you take something like that? It made for great social media. But big question mark, does it mean actual political change?
I don't know if it gets, the resistance movement that far down the pike, or Democrats that far down the pike in terms of, booting the Republicans out of power in the upcoming midterms. But it is a starting point. And this was, No Kings 1 was sort of the starting gun firing. And this was maybe the first or second lap around the track. There's a lot of race to run. There's a lot of race to go. There's no question about it. And we have to sort of get out of this instant gratification mode in this country. Donald Trump and the Republicans and MAGA spent about the last decade building what is in place right now. And it's like that boulder rolling towards everybody in Indiana Jones. It's still rolling. And my sense of it is that, folks have to steel themselves for the possibility that this is going to be a long struggle. The Democrats do not have their act completely together at this point. You're seeing some more fight in this shutdown battle that we're taking in right now. But I don't get the sense that they've coalesced around a message. The message seems to be healthcare, which strategically makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if it lights a big fire under a lot of people. And so they're going to have to figure this thing out. But at the very least, it shows that there's a pulse. And for the longest time there, over the first 6 or 7 months of this new administration, I mean, a lot of people were in the fetal position. And people were, finding real estate in Portugal and places like that, and Googling visa for Ireland and things like that. And I think what you saw over the weekend, Charlie, was a recognition that this is a battle, this is a fight, this is a struggle. Trump and MAGA, they're not going to give this up very easily. I hate to be Debbie Downer on a Monday, but this is going to be a long
I think
slog.
it's absolutely right. That's not a downer. That's just a reality check here.
Yeah.
So the president, and you said something that I think is very, very important, which is that Donald Trump barely even pretends that he's the president of all Americans. I mean, he is. Right. He's been the divider in chief from the beginning. The post that I wrote yesterday about all of this was the question, after the No Kings rally and after Trump's reactions, who really hates America? This whole notion that Donald Trump is the champion, he's wraps himself in the flag and patriotism. And yet at some point, doesn't patriotism involve actually liking or respecting your fellow Americans? And is there any greater expression of his contempt for fellow Americans and their constitutional rights than posting an AI video of himself as King Trump dumping a load of shit from a jet fighter? Now, again, I know that we're being trolled and we're being told, can't we take a joke? But when you have, and this is what I wrote. I said, I want people to think about this. On the 18th day of October in the year of our Lord 2025, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the most powerful military in the world, the successor to Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, Nobel Prize nominee, depicts himself dumping a load of feces on fellow Americans. Now, Jim, we've been talking about this for a long time, but it doesn't seem sufficient to say that it's not presidential. To me, it was this sort of quintessential sense of that how much contempt and loathing Donald Trump has for the actual, real, lived reality of Americans who may not support him.
No, I think that's dead on, Charlie. I just wrote a piece for Substack myself, and I suggested that this meme video is a gift from the gods for Democrats. Democratic ad makers should be putting together their own ads right now with their own twist on the Trump dumping on America video. And instead of Trump unloading gallons of crap on Times Square and other American cities, the new ad should show Donald Trump showering money on Wall Street and foreclosure notices on farms in Iowa. It should show Donald Trump showering meme coins on his family from a gilded Qatari 747, by the way, not a fighter jet. And while rural hospitals are being boarded up. This is an opportunity to show the American people that Trump has been dumping on all of us, and not just Democrats, not just people in the media and progressives and that sort of thing. He's been dumping on his own people for some time. And
I really like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No,
and I think it neatly illustrates what he's all about. Yes, he loves to take a shit on Democrats. He shits on them all the time. There's no question about it. But the reality is that his policies reward the oligarchs, reward the very rich in this country, and it gives the rest of us the shaft. And to me, Top Gun, get the Top Gun filmmakers out there and let's go. Let's put together an ad that really tells the story.
Well, I think part of his appeal has been that argument that I am for you, the other side dislikes you, and I think you turn that around on him, because he's not for you. Here's somebody who's waging war against fellow Americans, and you've articulated all of that. The interesting thing is people like J.D. Vance reject the idea that America is an idea. That we're supposed to regard America as it's the blood and soil. We are a specific set of people with a specific destiny, but Trump and Vance not only dislike the idea of America, they dislike the lived reality of America as well. And I think that
Yes.
is turning that around, saying, is this guy really for you? Does he really respect you? Does he really like you?
Yeah.
Here's somebody who
Yeah,
is
Charlie, remember those
sweet,
ads where he said Kamala is for they, them, and Trump
very
is for
powerful,
us? It
and
was
that
an
was the
effective
key.
ad.
Yeah.
No question, it was a key ad of the campaign, but it was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
He's not.
Yeah.
If you're a MAGA person, he's not for you.
Yeah.
That's the if the little Toto pulls the curtain back, and we see the true Wizard of the Oz, the land called Oz. It is Donald Trump pushing the buttons and pulling the levers for people like himself, and not for his own supporters. People like his own supporters who rely on Medicare, Medicaid, farm assistance, subsidies, people who need a helping hand from time to time. That's the real America. And I used to go to these rallies all the time, Charlie. I've been to all 50 states, in large part because of Donald Trump's rallies. And I remember going to those rallies and telling my colleagues, the people that I'm seeing in these crowds look like Democrats to me. They're showing up in their work overalls, their construction boots, their hard hats, and they weren't cosplaying. They were coming from the factory. They were coming from their blue collar jobs. And Trump, to his credit, tapped into something. There's no question about it. But he did a bait and switch with them. He gave them cultural hot button memes and videos and ways to get under their skin about foreigners and people who aren't from this country and so on, in exchange for vacuuming money out of their bank accounts and giving it to the very rich in this country. And Democrats just have to be smarter about delivering that message.
Well, they do. Okay, so let's talk about the last week in the Trump presidency. You have been following this for years, and it has been an amazing 7 or 8 days. We had it was just a week ago that you had the probably the best day of his presidency, where he is signing what looked like the ceasefire peace deal that obviously has not held up between Israel and Hamas. Clearly feels himself. I mean, this guy, you could sense that he thought he had the wind at his back. So he's immediately, pivoting from, solving the problems in the Middle East after 1,000 years, because only he could do that, to, trying to broker once again a peace with Russia and Ukraine. Just sort of fast forward to the end of the week, just a reminder, all of the speculation about, is Trump pivoting away from Vladimir Putin? Is he really, fed up? Is he going to pivot toward Ukraine? Well, that got blown up on Friday, didn't it? Because Vladimir Putin played him again. There was the threat of Tomahawk missiles. Vladimir Putin proposes a summit in Budapest with their fellow, wannabe autocrat, Viktor Orban. Zelensky comes to Washington, D.C., and apparently all the reports that I'm seeing, it was another shit show that, ranting and raving, telling him he should give up. So give me your sense about, where we're at with the president of peace in both the Middle East, and your take on the Middle East and his continuing attempts to appease Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, you used some salty language earlier, Charlie. I'll use some now. I mean, the idea that Donald Trump is a peacemaker or a man of peace or deserves the Nobel Peace Prize is a crock of shit.
Of course it is.
At every turn, he favors Vladimir Putin. At every turn. I can't think of a situation where Vladimir Putin did not come out on top in any dealings with Donald Trump. And there's something weird going on. I don't know what it is. It's sort of like a Scooby-Doo mystery at the very end. They'll pull the mask off of Old Man Withers and we'll figure it out. We'll solve the mystery. But for whatever reason, at every turn, he favors Vladimir Putin. And I was shocked to see on Friday, and this comes from my years covering the White House, Zelensky's at the White House. He's meeting with the President of the United States. And then after that visit is over, he's not doing a press conference from inside the White House. They booted him out to Lafayette Park. He was standing in Lafayette Park giving some comments to the reporters out there, which first of all, I thought was a massive security issue. I could not believe that I saw him standing out there in front of, I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but he's standing outside the White House fence in Lafayette Park talking to a group of reporters. That was dumbfounding to me. And at the same time, it just sort of he would not have done that to Vladimir Putin. For Vladimir Putin, he rolls out the red carpet.
Right.
You get to go for a ride in the Beast. In Alaska, What was he doing on American soil in Alaska? My God. And then, so he elevates Vladimir Putin whenever he gets a chance. And now they're going to go to Viktor Orban, and he's going to give Hungary a commercial, basically PR coup of seeing Trump and Vladimir Putin in Hungary, in Budapest. Give me a break. So that, again, is another win for Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin, this, Charlie, playing the long game. He just is. And he knows that Donald Trump helps him play the long game. He can grind down the Ukrainians by continuing to play Trump like a puppet. And I mean, you look at what's took place in the Middle East. Yes, we all are very glad to see the images of the hostages coming home. There's no question about it. But this was a hostage for prisoner swap that we've seen before between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This has occurred before. Yeah. And we're already seeing that peace agreement fall apart. And, is Trump too lazy to put together a real peace deal that's going to hold? It seems to me he's just going to let Netanyahu do what he wants, as he always has, which is why Netanyahu wants Donald Trump to be in the White House. And so, Trump talks about solving 7 wars. Sometimes I wonder if he's seen 7 brides for 7 brothers too many times. I don't know why he keeps gravitating towards the number 7.
Means a lot to him.
Well, 7 means a lot to him. But I mean, as he said the other day, I don't think I'm going to heaven. Did you catch him saying that, Charlie, when he was on Air Force?
I did. I don't know what it's.
No shit.
Yeah, there's interesting things, scrambling around in his brain. But let's go back to the Vladimir Putin, because you're talking about how he continues to play Donald Trump. And this account over the weekend in the New York Times, I thought was so revealing. And the headline was Putin's Trump strategy: lots of flattery and talk of business deals. Yep. And it says, even as Mr. Putin has pounded Ukrainian cities and waged grinding warfare in the country's east, he has invested dozens of hours into flattering Trump, dangling the prospect of Russian-American business deals, and sending the message that Russia is open to talks to end its invasion while it continues it. Look, Vladimir Putin, old KGB agent, he knows, he understands exactly how Trump's mind works. You suck up, that it does. There's no geopolitical vision here. There's no larger sense. You suck up to him. You dangle more opportunities for graft and grift in front of him, which the whole world has figured out. And you buy yourself more time to keep doing this. He may be frustrated at various times with what Putin is doing, but he's always going to come back when he hears his master's voice. And it's just that story, flattery and business deals. That's,
and the rest of the world has
so many
figured this
stories.
out. Yeah, and didn't we have video of the leader of Indonesia the other day asking to talk to one of Trump's sons? I mean, there's a for sale sign hanging in front of the White House, ladies and gentlemen. And when Trump's flying the Qatari plane, I suppose that the for sale sign will be on the Qatari plane. But this is who Donald Trump is, and this is what occurred to me at the end of the first term. That the ultimate problem at the end of the day for Donald Trump is that he doesn't understand the job of president of the United States. The job of president of the United States is to serve the American people, not serve yourself. And he just sees it that way. He sees it as serving. It's there to heal whatever, psychological wounds he has, his narcissism and so on. But he's also, he and his family, I mean, down to Barron, they're enriching themselves in unbelievable ways.
See, this story, I'm really glad you brought this up, because these are these huge stories that tend to fall between the cracks. That hot mic moment with the president of Indonesia. So here's the president of the United States talking to the president of Indonesia, who says at some point, can you have Eric call me? Eric Trump, one of the fail sons. And Trump says, he's a good boy. I'll have him. So they're basically cutting a business deal for the Trump business while the president of the United States is doing diplomacy. Now, again, at one time that would have been a major scandal. By the way, the biggest story from last week, I thought that, again, the danger is that we lose it, are the reports that they are now going to be weaponizing the IRS to go after progressive organizations. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when the use of the IRS, the attempt to use the IRS to go after political opponents, was an article of impeachment against Richard Nixon. Now it's just a one news cycle story. that's going on here. Hey, any thoughts about the John Bolton indictment, which came? Which came like one day before the pardon of George Santos, and I don't want to miss the commutation of yet another deeply, deeply corrupt politician who is so corrupt that his fellow Republicans expelled him from the House, and yet because he sucks on the right nipples of MAGA, he's a free man right now. So again, isn't it one of the case? For my friends, everything; for my enemies, the law.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that we're seeing a spoil system on steroids right now. It's just unreal. Trump is doing these things, I think, to just show that he can do them, to say, I can do whatever I want. I am the king. And in dictatorships and authoritarian regimes and monarchies, the people in charge get to run their judicial system like this, where if you criticize, if you are a sharp critic, if you're an opponent of the regime, you get tossed in jail. And if you are out there to support Trump, then you get benefits. It comes with fringe benefits. And yes, John Bolton. I mean, if you talk to the experts, they will say. I had Frank Figliuzzi on the other day, and he was saying, there are elements to the John Bolton story that are troubling.
Maybe there.
It was being investigated during the Biden administration and so on. And I totally get all that. But at the same time, the timing of this is unreal. You have Comey, Letitia James, and Bolton back to back to back. The timing of it, to me, looks very corrupt, and it gives the appearance of big time impropriety, and it's just not how we should be running our country and our justice system. But George Santos gets let off scot free. He gets sprung from prison, and not a cry of foul from anybody on the Republican side. They're just this is how it goes now. We just let him out.
Well, it's crazy. You're making an important point here, and I haven't fully developed this idea. But the ongoing criminalization of the Trump administration has the effect of binding people more closely to MAGA. Because right now, here's the thing: that if you are in that tribe, there's the prospect that you will, never be held accountable legally. That as long as you never say a single word that is critical of Donald Trump, as long as you keep singing from the hymnal, you have an automatic get out of jail card across the board. On the other hand, if you do break with Donald Trump, if you do go off on your own, there's the chance he will come after you. There's you think about the kinds of people like John Bolton who now face the prospect of indictment and imprisonment. So as this goes on, and again, it's sort of like the mafia, the more egregious the behavior, the tighter people have to stay in that tribe, because within the tribe is safety, outside the tribe is dangerous. And so you see this sort of North Korean style rhetoric so much, because that is what you have to do to stay under the umbrella of Donald Trump's beneficence and avoid his wrath. And again, maybe I'm going a little bit too far here, but the fact that George Santos
maybe that AI video that
I
suggested should have Trump showering pardons on his cronies too. I mean, maybe that should be another illustration that should be in that ad. But I mean, it's not who we are. And I think it's part of the reason why you saw people showing up in force on Saturday. I think that there's a real recognition that we're up against it right now.
And it is getting worse. I mean, it is getting worse. So let's talk about a little bit. This is almost a sideshow at the moment, but it does sound like he is itching to actually have a war with Venezuela, even though the Maduro regime, which by the way is completely loathsome and authoritarian in its own way, is doing everything it can apparently to appease Trump. And then we have this little outburst on the side where the president of Colombia, which has we haven't had conflict with, says, there was an innocent fisherman that you just blew up. You murdered an innocent man. And Trump's response is to go after the entire country of Colombia, cutting them off from aid. So now we are in a war of words with the Colombians. I mean, it feels that it is this kind of this out of control government by whim, day to day, almost unpredictable.
Yeah, and Charlie, and you know that the Colombians have been real partners with the United States when it comes
They
to
have been.
drug interdiction and so on. And so Donald Trump is, he's claiming that he's going after drug cartels by, droning them and so on.
Yeah.
And yet he's now going to alienate a major partner in that effort. It just goes to show you that this is all scattershot. And it's based on what you and I were talking about earlier, which is it's all about, who kisses up to him, who kisses his ass. Yeah. And, I think that the president of Brazil demonstrated during the United Nations that there is a path for some of these other heads of state around the world in their dealings with Donald Trump. And you know what? It may cost a little bit here economically for some of these countries, but I think history will remember them well. And I mean, that's been my question throughout this entire ordeal with the Venezuelans, where they're just bombing these drug boats. I talked to Jim Himes the other day, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, and he used the words murder. He said, "We are murdering people in the Caribbean." That is a direct quote from the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, because we just don't know. I mean, we think we know because of drone technology and so on, that they basically know who they're taking out. But as as the Colombian president said, they killed an innocent fisherman. So it makes you wonder, were there any kids on board with these drug cartels that were running these boats? Were there teenagers? Were there innocent people that were being used as human shield? We have no idea, because they're just getting blown out of the water instead of being interdicted. I mean, Charlie, you and I both know this has been going on for a long time. The Coast Guard or the Navy, I mean, the DEA, they can interdict the authorities can interdict these boats out on the open seas. Yeah. And, under the threat of being fired upon, do basically what needs to be done, which take them into custody and try them for what they're doing.
Well, another one of the big developments from last week was that the admiral who is in charge of that abruptly announced his resignation. I mean, I was concerned, the days before that this was going on, and we had not seen any sort of dissent or resistance from the chain of command. Well, we're starting to see that. So, there were some. Yeah, there are some green shoots, besides no kings. The universities suddenly seem to have found their backbone as well. I don't know about you, but I imagine you had the same reaction when you saw all of those reporters leaving the Pentagon en masse, turning in their cards rather than bending the knee. It does seem as if there is that collective action we haven't had before. People looking over their shoulder and going, okay, I'm not alone here. I'm not alone. No kings. The reporters across ideological lines decided, bullshit, we're not going to sign Pete Hegseth's thing. The universities, one after another, saying we're not going to sign that Trumpian compact. So I don't know. There were some positive developments last week.
Yeah, no question about it. I wish we had seen the White House press corps do that when the Associated Press was being targeted by Trump at the very beginning of this new administration. I mean, that was what I was advocating, that the press should have just walked out and not covered him and not given him his pictures. But what was interesting about the way things went down over at the Pentagon is that instead of going after one news organization, they went after everybody. So it sort of created the cover, politically speaking and journalistically speaking, for everybody to say, to hell with this. We're not going to put up with this. And it just goes to show you that Pete Hegseth is not ready for prime time. As a defense secretary, he has a team around him that is not ready for prime time. And so, of course, they did something ham-handed that made the press look great. I mean, I thought that it was wonderful to see them all marching out of the Pentagon. You don't need to, I mean, it's good to be there. It's one of those places where reporters can roam around and talk to generals and get information and so on. But that's how it should be. And you can cover this stuff from the outside too. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody's got Signal. Everybody can text. Pete Hegseth should know all too well. Everybody has Signal.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And so the reporters can still go do their jobs and get their scoops. But to target them in this fashion, I thought it made the press look good. And so I'm sure Trump hates that. He probably thinks this was stupid, what they did over there. And he's right. He would be right.
You raise an interesting point, though, because this, of course, is not an outlier. That this is not going to be the last time they do it. And the next time they do something at the White House, it will be interesting whether the White House press corps takes your advice. And, having seen that, okay, this is what real journalists look like. We can actually do this. We do look pretty good. You might have that kind of reaction again, when this inevitably happens. Jim Acosta, thank you so much for joining me on this Monday. I appreciate it very, very much. Thanks for being on the podcast.
You bet, Charlie. Anytime. Great to do it.
And thank you all for listening to this episode of To the Contrary podcast. You know why we do this, why we're going to continue to do this, because now more than ever, we have to continually remind ourselves, number one, that we are not alone, and number two, we are not the crazy ones.